Section, monster. Last night, they came looking for me again. They still didn't say anything, just silently standing by my bed. As for me, I remained frozen, lying motionless on the bed, staring blankly at the burnt black bodies without heads surrounding me. And he whispered in my ear, "In fact, you are just like me." I have become too familiar with meeting them in the late night, yet my whole body still sweats profusely. Only when they silently left did I hear Dunin's steady breathing from the bed opposite mine. The cold moonlight shone in through the window, and the lights in the dormitory had been off for a long time. Feeling a chilly breeze, I struggled to move, feeling the dagger hidden under my knee, sensing its rough and rugged handle, and gradually my breath returned to normal. Then I sank into a deep sleep. Sometimes, I also returned to visit my old school, the pedagogical university. I sat in the flower garden in front of dormitory 2 for male students, where there used to be a ho tree, but now it was replaced by colorful flowers swaying in the wind. I often sat pensively, gazing at the modern 7-story dormitory building in front of me, trying to imagine its previous appearance: weathered red bricks, wooden windows swaying as if about to fall, and the large iron gate rusting heavily, and the youthful faces that used to come in and out of this building. Suddenly, I felt a heavy heartache, as if being attacked by a soft and tender emotion. And the door of memories involuntarily opened slightly, incessantly, impossible to close. If you know me, you would feel that I am a reserved and reticent person. Most of the time, I try to be alone, eat alone, walk alone, and even in class, I try to avoid sitting with others. Don't come near me. I often use this gaze to prevent those who try to understand or approach me. Everyone seems to respect me, but keeps their distance from me. And I have become accustomed to the personalities and habits of those around me. If you see a person with a pale face, a disdainful expression, but always paying attention to others in the classroom, the canteen, or the schoolyard, that person is me. I live in room 313 of Building B, South Pham Dormitory of J University. My roommate's name is Du Nin, studying for a master's degree in law. Perhaps because we share the same room, he is one of the few people who talk to me in the law academy. He is a kind-hearted person, and he can see that he has tried to establish a good relationship with me, so I won't feel too lonely in the academy, although I don't really care about it. However, I don't shy away from occasionally chatting with him and even his overly affectionate girlfriend. Come on, let's eat together. I was holding a bowl of spicy mixed noodles, trying to focus on a photo and its caption on the computer, not noticing when Du Nin and his girlfriend entered the room. It was a skewer of grilled goat meat, sprinkled with hot chili and various aromatic spices, and the golden fat was dripping down, emitting a charred aroma. I thought at that moment my face must have turned paler than the wall behind. I stared at the skewer of goat meat held in front of me, and my throat made a few choking sounds. Then, I vomited half of the noodles I had just eaten back into the bowl I was holding. I covered my mouth, carrying the bowl filled with vomit, and rushed out of the room, leaving a cloud of smoke behind. I heard TRN Jiao's astonished voice from behind. "What's wrong with him?" I leaned over the sink in the restroom, splashing water on my face. When I looked up, I saw my disheveled face with water and cold sweat, my vacant eyes, and my mouth still smeared with bits of uncleaned food. I bent over and vomited again a few times, feeling my stomach empty, truly nothing left to vomit. I struggled to stand up, trembling, and walked to the water tap, drinking a sip of cold water, rinsing my mouth, and spitting it out. I threw the bowl of noodles into the trash bin and stumbled back to the room. Inside the room, it was a mess. TRN Jiao was crouched on Du Nin's bed, and there was vomit all over the floor, filling the room with a pungent odor. Du Nin held his nose, placing a wash basin in front of her. Seeing me coming in, Trn Jiao raised her sweat and teary face and pointed at me, wanting to say something, but she was overwhelmed by a bout of nausea and couldn't speak. Dunin looked at me awkwardly. Just now, Jiao didn't know what happened to you, and she was curious, so she came to see what you were looking at on the computer, and the result was, I didn't respond to him, but went straight to the computer. It was a web page I was looking at, containing several photos. Among them was a picture of a decapitated head with the skin on the neck and head peeled off. There were 3 other photos of victims with their forelimbs and arms chopped off. These were crime scene photos from a murder case that occurred in Wisconsin, USA, in 2000. I had downloaded these photos and saved them in a file called Serious Destruction. I stood up and walked to Trn Jiao's side, crouching down to speak to her. Are you okay? Trn Jiao was exhausted, looking at me, fearfully huddling back behind. Don't come near me, she trembled, raising her hand, pointing at the computer, then pointing at me, her lips trembling, finally squeezing out to words, monster. Jiao, Dunin shouted loudly, looking at me with concern. I smiled at him, indicating that I didn't mind. I really didn't mind. I am a monster, I know that. My name is PHNGMC. 2 years ago, in a fire, I was the only one lucky enough to survive. The spring in City J was oppressively hot. Even though the buds had not yet appeared on the trees, the temperature had risen to 17 to 18 degrees Celsius. THIV was sitting in a speeding jeep on the streets, irritatedly, unbuttoning his shirt. He was feeling frustrated, but it wasn't just because of the scorching spring weather. As a police officer, THIV was facing the most difficult case in his 10 years on the force. On March 14, 2002, TRNM, a 31-year-old Han ethnicity woman living in room 402, Tower 32, Min CHU Building, 83 THIBC Street, HNGVIN District, City J, was found dead in her apartment. According to the autopsy results, the time of death was estimated to be between 2 p.m. to 3 p.m., and the cause of death was asphyxiation. 2 strangulation marks were found on the victim's neck, confirming that she had been choked to death by the culprit. The initial investigation ruled out robbery, as there were no signs of forced entry or missing belongings in the room. The upper body of the victim was exposed, and her lower body was dressed in short attire, with no signs of sexual assault or rape. Surprisingly, after her death, the assailant had opened her abdomen and left the murder weapon, a kitchen knife, at the crime scene. The victim's husband confirmed that it was a kitchen knife from their home. The crime scene was gruesome, and the officers couldn't bear to look at it. Organs and blood of the victim were scattered on the floor. The police found a cup in the kitchen, and tests confirmed that it contained a mixture of fresh milk and the victim's blood. This couldn't help but remind them of the legendary monster, a blood-sucking demon. In the month that followed, 2 more home invasion murders occurred in City J, with the victims being women aged 25 to 35. The victims' bodies were also mutilated, and at each crime scene, there was a mixture of the victim's blood and other substances found. The city police department established a special task force to handle this case, but after a week, there was no progress in solving the crime. Just when the task force was getting frustrated, THNH, a police officer from City C, arrived in City J and proposed a suggestion that left everyone astonished to find a graduate student majoring in criminal studies at a university in City J. THIV, in charge of the task force, initially thought he was joking, but THNH seriously recounted a story that went like this. In the summer of 2001, City C experienced 4 consecutive rape murder cases. All 4 victims were female office workers, aged 25 to 30. After raping the victims, the perpetrator strangled them to death with a rope. The murders took place on the rooftops of 4 high-rise buildings under construction in City C. At that time, INTHTH's superior was the head of the City HNHCHSM security station, who had recently been promoted to deputy chief of the city police department. The newly appointed official wanted to make a name for himself and leaked some information about the case to the media. On TV, he even assured the city's residents that the case would be solved within half a month. 2 days later, a letter arrived from a citizen, placed right on the task force's desk. The letter stated that the killer was a perverted individual with a psychopathic mindset who couldn't establish normal relationships with women. Thus, he resorted to raping and killing to fulfill his sexual desires. Furthermore, the letter suggested that the murderer was not older than 30 years old. Initially, the task force considered it to be a wild fantasy from a crime fiction enthusiast and dismissed it. However, after hearing about it, Deputy Chief H&H found it intriguing and had someone investigate the person who wrote the letter. When he learned that the letter was written by someone named PH&GMC, a soon-to-graduate college student, he became excited and personally drove PH&GMC to each crime scene. Afterward, he took all the case files to his office for PH&GMC to meticulously study. On one night, autopsy results showed that the murders usually happened between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. PH&GMC went to one of the crime scenes, and this time, INTHTHNH accompanied him. The young man stood on the rooftop of the tallest building, which was also the site of one of the crimes, for quite some time, before finally uttering a sentence that deeply struck INTHTHNH. He's not raping women, he's raping the whole city. After returning to the department, Fuang Mok made the following suggestion to the project team. First, investigate all popular movie theaters in the whole city, especially those near industrial parks. Construction school. Looking for a young man aged 20 to 25, a bit thin, short hair, height from 1m601 m70, right-handed. Moreover, left hand wears a watch, on his left wrist there is a scratch, wears glasses, has a high school education. Second, look for a person with the above characteristics in construction sites throughout the city. Third, search in the villages and towns around City C for a young man who failed the university entrance exam to enter the city to work as a hired worker with the above characteristics, especially families with only 1 or 2 brothers. Live with dad. He even said, when caught, the killer will probably wear a white shirt. The members of the task force were initially skeptical about Fuang Mok's seemingly baseless speculations. However, Deputy Chief Hin ordered his subordinates to search for a suspect matching the characteristics provided by Fuang Mok. 2 days later, a female owner of a local cinema near the train station revealed that she knew someone fitting the description, as he worked at a nearby construction site. The workers in the area often visited her cinema, but this man always went alone and only attended adult-rated movies at night. On one occasion, he encountered a colleague from the construction site while watching an adult movie, blushed, and discreetly left, leaving a strong impression on the cinema owner. The police team went to the construction site and found the young man there, aided by the construction supervisor. His name was Hong Vin Hu, a surveyor at the site. When the police showed their badges and asked him to show his left wrist, Hong Vin Hu suddenly ran away, but he was swiftly apprehended. After bringing him to the investigation office, Hong Vin-hu confessed to committing all four rape and murder cases. Hong Vin-hu was a 21-year-old man with a good high school education from Tian Tian Village, Batai Town, City C. In 2000, after failing the university entrance exam, he studied for another year and retook the exam but still didn't pass. Later, he followed his uncle to the city and worked as a laborer on various construction sites, but each job didn't last long. Eventually, his uncle introduced him to work as a surveyor at this construction site where his limited educational background was sufficient for the job. At the time of his arrest, Hong Vin-hu was indeed wearing an old but neatly washed white shirt. Huang Mok's description of the suspect's appearance, family background, work environment, and habits matched Hong Vin-hu's profile. The only difference was that Hong Vin-hu's parents had been divorced for a long time, and he had no brothers but only one sister who had moved away with their mother and had no contact with them. However, all of this was enough to impress the police officers, especially how accurately Huang Mok described the situations at the crime scenes. There were even suspicions that Huang Mok might have been present at the crime scenes given the level of detail in his descriptions. Huang Mok explained that through observing the crime scenes, all the victims' trousers were pulled down below their knees, and their knees were injured. Additionally, some skin from the victims was found sticking to the railing on the rooftop, corresponding to the scratch marks on their chests. This indicated that the perpetrator chose a position from behind during the sexual assault. This was a deeply symbolic position. Firstly, when a woman is attacked from behind, if the man presses her down or holds her hands from behind, the range of struggling is minimal. Moreover, with the trousers pulled down to the knees, the range of leg movement is severely limited. Therefore, this position allows the least resistance. Secondly, from a psychological standpoint, entering from behind is the most primitive sexual position. During sexual intercourse, men feel a sense of conquest and satisfaction. Therefore, this position gives men the highest level of stimulation compared to other positions. That night, Huang Mok stood on the silent and dark rooftop, taking in the panoramic view of the entire city. He gazed at the brightly lit high-rise buildings, while below, a stream of cars flowed in long lines. He performed the violent act with force, moving up and down vigorously, while the elegantly dressed woman below struggled helplessly. From his elevated position, his vision was clear, and he felt an exhilarating release. Huang Mok closed his eyes. In some luxurious house in the city, the man was anxiously waiting for his wife. Little did he know that his wife was being trampled and humiliated under someone's feet. Could he? Perhaps in his eyes, the whole city was like a giant female reproductive organ. For sure, in that brief moment, he felt pleasure in conquering the city, and thus, in his real life, he must be a failure. Choosing to rape and murder as a means of venting his hatred towards society signifies that sex holds a significant meaning for him. It makes him feel curious, mysterious, and exhilarated to the extreme, but at the same time, it also brings him shame. If a man can establish a normal relationship with women, this desire for sexual conquest will gradually fade with more life experiences. Therefore, the perpetrator is likely someone who cannot establish a normal relationship with women, someone who lacks the care and attention of women in his life. Moreover, individuals with such psychological traits are usually not too old. Either they experience this during their adolescence, or, if older, they would have dealt with this psychological aspect through social experiences. Hence, if he's relatively young and there are no recent similar cases, he has been committing these crimes for some time. Considering the crime scene on the rooftop of a construction building, it's undoubtedly the ideal place to satisfy his urge to conquer the entire city while also being familiar with the area. Therefore, the perpetrator is likely someone with experience working at construction sites. A person with a low income and twisted psychology would probably visit places related to sex. Engaging with prostitutes? Probably not, and even if he did, he couldn't afford it regularly due to financial constraints. The most suitable places would be the budget cinemas, showing adult-rated movies at night. After examining the victims' bodies, they found that the left fingernails of one of the victims were broken. The broken nail was found right beside the girl's corpse while lying on her back. Surprisingly, among all 4 victims, this girl had the fewest injuries. This indicates that she didn't resist fiercely during the assault. Combining this with the fact that the broken nail was found close to her body, it's likely that while the perpetrator was strangling her, she struggled vigorously, causing her nail to break. They found a piece of skin, blood type A, under the broken nail, suggesting that the victim's nail was likely broken upon contact with the perpetrator's body. As the perpetrator chose to strangle from behind, the area where the victim's hands could touch was limited, most likely restricted to the perpetrator's hands. Huang Mok noticed that the fingernail was torn, not bent. This indicates that when the nail scratched the perpetrator's skin, it must have been torn upon contact with something. What could it be on the perpetrator's hand that could tear the fingernail? Huang Mok immediately thought of a metal wristwatch. Furthermore, this person is likely to work at a construction site wearing a metal watch, which already stands out from the ordinary. Therefore, the perpetrator is likely a young man, not over 25 years old, without any women in his household, or only has brothers and has experienced failures in his life. Perhaps he is a person with a certain level of education, working as a laborer at a construction site with a certain level of education, having experienced failures in life, not older than 25 years old. The closest answer is a person who failed the university entrance exam and comes from a rural area. If he is such a person, he would definitely use different ways to show his distinctiveness compared to those who come from rural areas and work as laborers at construction sites. For example, having short and neat hair to stand out from the sweaty, long-haired workers, wearing glasses to appear intellectual, and possibly wearing a white shirt that contrasts with the workers' clothes covered in lime and cement. To summarize, he is a person with short, somewhat skinny, wearing glasses, a white shirt, and a metal wristwatch on his left hand. There might be scratches on his left wrist, caused by a victim scratching him, and people who wear wrist watches on their left hand usually are right-handed. After Huang Mok presented his reasoning, all the police officers in the Special Task Force remained silent, each displaying complex emotions on their faces. Clearly, after the entire process of deduction unfolded step by step, solving the case seemed inevitable, as easy as turning one's hand. However, could anyone really take the exact first step in this process? Chisam broke the silence, saying with a laugh, "Ha, ha, you told us Hong Vin-hu's name right from the beginning, and it helped us a lot." Everyone burst into relieved laughter. Huang Mok did not laugh. He kept looking down at the ground, lost in thought. The case was handed over to the prosecutor's office conveniently. The people in City C praised the police for swiftly solving the case. Chisam wanted to reward Huang Mok materially. Previously, he cleverly explained to Huang Mok that the police couldn't publicly announce that the case was solved thanks to the help of a 22-year-old student, and Huang Mok seemed to understand. However, Huang Mok declined the reward. When asked if he had any requests, Huang Mok answered simply, he wanted to have a private conversation with Hong Vin-hu before he went to trial. Despite the curiosity surrounding the conversation, under Huang Mok's firm insistence, the department arranged for Huang Mok and Hong Vin-hu to have an undisturbed conversation. The conversation lasted for over 2 hours, during which Fuang Mok filled nearly half a notebook and recorded to tapes. NTHTH and H had listened to a segment of the recording, but it barely touched on the case. Fuang Mok seemed more interested in Hong Vin-hu's life, since he could remember things at 21 years old. When Hong Vin-hu was 5 years old, his parents divorced, and his mother took his older sister to marry in another area, leaving Hong Vin-hu to live with his father. From a young age, he was introverted and disliked talking to others, but he was diligent in his studies and always received praise, being the most capable student in the village to pass the university entrance exam. At the age of 8, Hong Vin-hu accidentally caught his father having an affair with a married woman in the village. As a result, he was beaten severely by his father. At the age of 14, while he was in junior high school, he was taken by a senior female student to a mountain. When that female student grabbed his hand and pressed it against her chest, he was terrified and desperately rolled down the mountain. However, 2 years later, at the age of 16, while he was working on the fields, he suddenly flipped a female classmate who had a quite good relationship with him down to the fields, then kissed and touched her all over. The girl screamed in fear, and the people in the village rushed to rescue her. After that, his father had to compensate the girl's family with a donkey, and the village elders personally mediated, leading to the incident being temporarily settled. But since then, Hong Vin-hu's academic performance deteriorated significantly. After failing the university entrance exam twice, he followed his uncle to the city to work as a laborer. Within just over a year, he had changed 5 construction sites, enduring the disdain and contempt from urban residents. Due to his introverted and arrogant personality, he always stayed for a short time at each site. In his spare time, Hong Vin-hu often went to the small theater on the street to watch adult films. It was there that he first watched a level 3 film. From that moment on, images of provocative women in level 3 films always occupied his mind, to the point where one night, he followed a working woman back home late at night. Since then, Fuang Mok almost became the advisor of the City C Police Department. With his help, they successfully solved a kidnapping case, a scam for extortion case, and 2 murder cases. In all these cases, Fuang Mok described the characteristics of the suspects, which greatly contributed to solving the cases.